Yes, good afternoon. Sorry for the delay, but we're going to get a nice high and we're going to travel through the different areas. Okay, so while we travel, just get high. Sorry we don't have any sampling, but we will get high on knowledge. Okay? Okay, so we are looking at our Cannabis Forum and we'll be cultivating a new industry. That's the title of our forum today. And we're going to go through different speakers. So what I will do now is introduce you to all the different speakers so that we do not have to stop in between. So we will just flow as the mechanics go. Okay, so the first person speaking to us, which everybody's waiting on, right, Mr. Reid? Mr. Sheldon Errol Jeremy Reid. He's the legal officer at the Cannabis Licensing Authority. That's why we're waiting to do all this work, CLA. And Mr. Reid is a graduate of the University of the West Indies, the Caville campus, where he obtained his Bachelor's of Law with honors, and also he obtained from Mona campus the Bachelor's of Arts degree with honors as well. So he's very good. He obtained his legal education certificate from the Norman Manley Law School, where he received the Honorable Mr. Justice Kenneth Smith OJ Memorial Prize for being the best second-year student in trial advocacy. He was also an advocate for the Norman Manley Law School Margaret Fort Mooting Team, which won the Margaret Fort Memorial Inter-Schools Regional Mooting Competition, and this was in 2016. In 2016 also, he was admitted to practice law in Jamaica, and he joined the law firm Hart, Murad Fata as an associate, while in 2017, he worked at the Ministry of National Security as a legal officer, and he is presently a legal officer at the Cannabis Licensing Authority, CLA. Mr. Reid has practiced in the areas of commercial and corporate litigation, and he has a keen interest in intellectual property and industrial development. He enjoys writing, photography, art, and traveling, and is passionate about the potential of Jamaica and its people, and you'll be hearing about cannabis and the Jamaican law. So, Mr. Reid is sitting closest to me. After Mr. Reid comes Professor Wayne Mclaughlin. He was a Bachelor of Honors in Science from degree in Biology from the University of Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, and a Doctor of Philosophy degree in Biochemistry from the Mona campus. He joined the staff at UW in 1989. Now we're getting an idea of the age. And in 2005 to 2013, for 8 years, he was the head of the Department of Basic Medical Sciences. And in 2010 to 2016, he was also a Deputy Dean of Preclinical. In 2017, he was appointed as the Deputy Dean of Entrepreneurship and Innovation, hence cannabis, money. He's the director of CARIGEN, which is Caribbean Genetics, an independent commercial forensic DNA laboratory, and Caritox, which is Caribbean Toxicology, right here at you in this building on level 4. Professor Wayne Mclaughlin is currently the co-chair of UW Medicinal Cannabis Research Group, and he's a member of the Health and Scientific Research Committee of the CLA. He has published over 40 original and review papers in local, regional, and international journals, and his current research involves the genetics of Jamaican cannabis plants and developing standards for medicinal cannabis. He has received a number of awards, so bear with me, he's building a whole lot. 2 Fulbright Fellowships, Scientific Council Award for Best Scientific Performance in 1982 as well as 1987. The Silver Musgrave Medal in 2001 from the Institute of Jamaica for Outstanding Merit in the Field of Science. In 2010, he received the Gleaner Award for Science and Technology. And in 2016, he was nominated for the National Medal in Science and Technology. So you can see, you will hear a whole lot on the new green economy opportunities from Professor Wayne Mclaughlin. Mrs. Carol Lindsay, she's our Chief Analyst at the Caribbean Toxicology Lab, Caritox, and she's an assistant lecturer in basic medical sciences. She's a member also of the UA Medicinal Cannabis Research Group, the International Association of Forensic Toxicologists, and the Jamaican Bureau of Standard Cannabis Technical Committee for the development of standards for the cannabis industry. She holds a diploma in management studies and MPhil degree in biochemistry from UWI Mona campus, and she's a trained legal auditor, an ISO 9001, and is presently pursuing her PhD degree in biochemistry here. And what else can she research on but chemotyping of Jamaican cannabis? So prior to joining UWI, Mrs. Lindsay was the quality control manager for 7 years at Jerry & Neville Limited. and she'll be telling us all about the quality of standards in the cannabis industry. Sorry, Dr. Haughton is not here right now, so I will leave him and come back to him until he steps in. He's at another presentation. Mr. Blaine Dowdle, hope I got the name right. He's the CEO of Itopia Life, and he's an innovator, putting new ideas into play at their earliest stages. And what else in today's cannabis industry? This carries weight. Welcome, Dr. Haughton. In 2015, as founder and CEO of MedCam Access, that's MCA, Mr. Dowdle sold MCA to Canopy Growth Corporation, CGC, Canada's first publicly traded medical cannabis company. MCA became the cornerstone of CGC's retail strategy for its Tweed division. And Mr. Dowdle joined Canopy as its head of international development and special projects. In this position, Mr. Dowdle developed seminal partnerships such as Canopy Therapeutics and Research and Development Alliance that clinically validates cannabis-based medicines. He also consulted with numerous governments on medical cannabis policy, and through projects in Jamaica and Antigua, his long-time love for Caribbean then deepened. Mr. Dowdle has again taken on the role of CEO and pioneering implementing the vision for Itopia Life and Jamaica's new medical cannabis industry. And now we will hear on his topic, Understanding the Cannabis Industry. I will go to Dr. Haughton. Dr. Andre Haughton is a senior lecturer in the Department of Economics at the University of the West Indies Mona campus. He earned his PhD from the University of Essex in the UK. He is a scholar of KPMG Pete Marwick. He was a scholar that he got during his BSc while he was doing economics and accounting. He's a scholar for Thomas De La Rue while he was doing his MSc in economics here at UWI. And he's a British Commonwealth scholar while he was doing his PhD in UK. He's also an International Monetary Fund. Here comes money, 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 money. IMF Distinguished Academic Fellow. He was named the University of the West Indies Most Outstanding Researcher for the Faculty of Social Sciences in 2017, and also honored as the Most Outstanding UWI Alumni for the decade 1999 to 2008. Andre, I didn't realize you were this old. He's member of the private sector of Jamaica Economic Policy Committee. Dr. Haughton publishes a weekly briefing in the newspaper, The Gleaner. I'm sure you see it every week, today alone. That simplifies, he analyzes, he explains, and he opens discussion on economic issues affecting Jamaica and by extension the Caribbean in a global context. He's the founder of Valley Foundation, a charitable organization that provides resources for at-risk and marginal youths across Jamaica. He's the founder and the CEO of Scarce Commodity, and that's a firm that markets and provides technical support to the Caribbean's cannabis industries. He's the author of Developing Sustainable Balance of Payments in Small Countries, Lessons from Macroeconomic Deadlock in Jamaica, and that was published in 2017, and his students can tell you all about that. His topic, Cannabis Production and Consumption Patterns in Jamaica, 2018. Miss Lilyclaire Bellamy. She's the Executive Director of Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, JIPO. She's an attorney at law, a trained communicator with extensive experience in intellectual property law, health administration, and health law. She holds a bachelor's degree in communications and law and a master's in media studies and with a minor in educational technology. She directs the administration, the legal and policy aspects at JIPO. She provides legal advice and guidance relating to intellectual property laws, international relations, and issues to the portfolio minister, other ministries, and departments of government at their request. She's a director on the board of the Pharmacy Council of Jamaica and also the Scientific Research Council. She's a member of the National Nutraceutical Industry Jamaica, and she's a committed volunteer with membership on several boards, the Dress for Success, the Duke of Edinburgh Award, the Youth Business Trust, and the Source of Light Mission. She was the president and chief commissioner of the Girl Guides Association of Jamaica and vice chairman of the World Association of Girl Guides and Girl Scouts, London, England. Her topic, intellectual property rights and cannabis. Where are we? Dr. Winston Bellamy, he is a senior lecturer and the Deputy Dean of International and Alumni Affairs in the Faculty of Medical Sciences, UWI Mona. He's also a consultant psychiatrist at the University Hospital of the West Indies. He completed his MD at the University of Pest in Hungary. Is that the correct pronunciation? That will do. Okay, postgraduate degree in psychiatry at UWI, Masters in Public Health at Johns Hopkins University, and a Fulbright Fellowship in Substance Abuse Education, Prevention, and Treatment at Johns Hopkins University. He's an internationally certified addiction professional and a global master trainer of trainers in the treatment of substance use disorders. He's a past chief medical officer in the Ministry of Health. He's a past president of the Medical Association of Jamaica, past president of the Jamaica Fulbright Alumni Association, now known as the United States Exchanges of Alumni Association Jamaica. He's a past union president at the UWI and past president of the Jamaica Psychiatric Association. He's also past chairman of Bellevue Hospital Board of Management, past chairman of the Board of Supervision in the Ministry of Local Government, and past deputy chairman of the National Council of Drug Abuse. Dr. Delahaye established the Medicinal Cannabis Unit in the Ministry of Health in July 2017, where he's supervising the registration of many medicinal cannabis products in Jamaica. Now, ironically, he's a former captain in the Jamaica Defense Force, and he'll be telling us about cannabis medicinal value impact on health and scheduling. So I've introduced you to our panelists. So they will do their presentations, one after the other. We will not disturb them, so that you'll get a nice flow. And at the end, we will take a discussion. So I will ask first, Mr. Reid, if he can come.
Afternoon, everybody. Or should I say hi? Firstly, let me just say how truly honored I am to be presenting on this aspect of our culture and a bit of our identity as Jamaicans, along with this distinguished panel. It is truly an honor to be here today. So my name is Sheldon Reid, and I represent the Cannabis Licensing Authority. And today my presentation will be looking at ganja and the Jamaican law, the relationship that ganja had in our law, which was sort of a cat and dog type of relationship. And I'll be focusing on the history of prohibition of cannabis in Jamaica from 1913 to 1948. History and or traditional knowledge of cannabis being used as a medicine in Jamaica from the 1800s to the present. Dangerous Drugs Act of 1948, the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act of 2015, the 1961 Single Conventions on Narcotic Drugs, and how it acts as our regulatory green print, get the pun. The Dangerous Drugs Cannabis Licensing Interim Regulations, and the future of cannabis and the law. So this is roughly my outline. Now, before one could get a license to cultivate ganja, this is what it was. This was the situations. Jamaicans would be telling the cops, weed? No, sir. This is a baby Christmas tree. He's brought to court. He would say, Your Honor, weed is not a drug, it is a plant, and therefore I'm not a dealer, but a florist. I call this the period of prohibition, right? And that period started in 1913 with the 1913 Opium Law. And this bit of legislation, it banned the cultivation, distribution, consumption of ganja, and it was imposed as sort of a colonial decree by the colonial government of the day. And it was actually Britain who had ratified the 1912 Hague Convention, why that law was imposed in Jamaica. Coincidentally, Marcus Garvey returned to Jamaica in 1914. So we had the 1913 Opium Law, and then the next year Marcus Garvey came back to Jamaica and he started the UNIA. Now, the relevant sections of something like the Opium Law, it said that ganja was not lawful to be imported into the island, any at all. It said that no person could grow ganja in the land. And it said that any person contravening that section of the law would, on summary conviction before a resident magistrate, be liable to a penalty not exceeding £100, and on default of payment to imprisonment with or without hard labor. Now, £100 in 1913 was a lot of money, right? So, what was the rationale for these restrictions, such a rigid law? Well, according to the Transnational Institute's book titled The Rise and Decline of Cannabis Prohibition, the international regime for the control and psychoactive substances, beyond any moral or even racist roots it may initially have had, is first and foremost a system that reflects the geopolitics of North-South relations in the 20th century. Indeed, the strictest controls were placed on organic substances such as cocoa bush, poppy, and the cannabis plants, which are often part of the ancestral traditions of countries where these plants originate. Whereas the North's cultural products, such as tobacco, alcohol, were ignored, and their synthetic substances produced for the pharmaceutical industry. And according to them, not me, these things were done as a form of social controls of groups, social control of groups operating on the fringes of society. In 1924, that same Opium Law of 1913 was amended. And as you would have it, it made things even more difficult. You know, some historians recount that amendments were led by the church and white elites, and they believed that ganja was to be blamed for all the crimes that were plaguing society at the time, after slavery. Not lack of land or lack of equal opportunity, but ganja. In 1948, we then had the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1948. And it made things explicitly more rigid for ganja. It said that it was an offense to export or take steps to export ganja, and no provision was allowed for a license to participate in such an activity. It made it an offense to cultivate, gather, produce, sell, or otherwise deal in ganja. It said anybody who had ganja in their possession committed an offense. If you allowed ganja on your premises to be used for smoking, even if you never smoked it, it would be an offense. And if it wasn't your premises, but you managed the premises on which ganja was being smoked, it was an offense. And if you had in your possession any pipes or other utensils for use in connection with the smoking of ganja, it was an offense. Needless to say, smoking ganja was an offense. Incidentally, the 1930s and 1940s was marked with the rise of the early Rastafari movement led by Leonard Howell. Just side note. Internationally, it was much of the same. Cannabis was treated as a dangerous drug by various treaties and conventions, such as the Single Convention, which I'll expound on later, the Convention on Psychotropic Substances, and there's one interesting one. Cannabis was also declared a Schedule 1 drug in 1970 under the U.S. Controlled Substances Act. And it classifies ganja as having no currently accepted medicinal use and a high potential for abuse. So, the legislative history and rhetoric of cannabis in Jamaica's law from 1913 to 2015 essentially referenced cannabis as a dangerous drug that caused crime, had very little or no medicinal value, and it did not reflect cannabis as a medicine in the way that it is currently being presented before you today. There was thus a disconnect, I would think, between the law governing cannabis in Jamaica and the way in which our forefathers, and even us today, used and view ganja. So, Marcus Garvey's quote is quite interesting because it allows, well, he prompts us, I think, to go back to our past to get ahead in the future. He says, "A people without the knowledge of their history, origin, and culture is like a tree without roots." And since ganja is a tree with roots, we're going to go back. Now, in 1913, before 1913, cannabis was brought to Jamaica somewhere between the 1850s and 1860s by indentured workers. In fact, the term ganja is an Indian term for cannabis. It was also used in Africa as a medicine centuries before slavery and indentureship. Suta women would smoke it to ease the pain of childbirth and would grind seeds with bread or mealie pap and give it to children when they are being weaned. Post-slavery, ganja also became a mainstay among the lower class of society. It was common in the rural countryside and in the poor black districts of larger towns to see ganja being not only smoked recreationally, but used as a part of medicine. Used as medicine, rather. So, for instance, folk use of medicine would see something like the soaking of the bud or the green leaves in white overproof rum for the relief of stomach ache, toothache, and symptoms of asthma. And then you had your ganja tea that you would drink for the same thing. So, having gone back, it is my view that the current regulation or act that governs our industry, the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act, is sort of the dawn of a new day. It sort of bridges the gap between our past and our present. For the first time in our legislative history since 1913, the rhetoric of cannabis in our law has changed, for the most part, to what most of to what some of our people would view ganja as. So, or we've always said in our songs that it's the healing of the nation. You know, you'd have your grandmother with a flask of rum and the ganja. We've always treated it as a medicine, and I think it is being reflected in the law for the first time. Section 8 of the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act has also created for the first time an entity who is to enable the establishment of a lawful regulated industry in hemp and ganja. Not to burn or destroy, but to enable the establishment. I think that's pretty awesome. And for the first time, cannabis is not just treated as a one plant. There's I want to say, looking at its various aspects and the different, forgive me, Professor, if I'm not catching it right, but the different type of, or the different aspects of the cannabis plant. So it's not just one, but you have ganja, which has a certain level of THC, and you have hemp. So there's a separating of the plant and a looking at what it really is and not just treating it as one. And that has implications for how ganja is handled in Jamaica. If you have ganja, if you are going to cultivate ganja with a license, there are a different set of regulations that would apply to that as opposed to if you're going to cultivate hemp because of the THC content. So the authority, as birthed by the Dangerous Drugs Act, has power to issue regulations for the licenses that it issues. It has power to issue regulations for the governing of the cannabis industry now. And the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act has also, for the first time in our law, explicitly referred to ganja as a medicine. It has decriminalized 2 ounces or less, and each household is entitled to grow up to 5 plants for the horticultural use of the leaves. And sacramental use of cannabis for Rastafarians is now observed for the first time. But the authority also has duties to ensure that our regulations do not contravene our international obligations. And such obligations that exist under the Single Convention on narcotic drugs is an example of these obligations. These obligations essentially represent our green print. Remember, I started saying that. What I mean by that is our current regulations, the interim regulations, must capture various obligations as prescribed by Article 28 of the Single Convention. And Article 28 states that if a party, such as Jamaica, permits the cultivation of cannabis for the production of cannabis or cannabis resin, it shall apply systems of controls as prescribed by Article 23, respecting the control of opium poppy, and that parties shall adopt such measures as may be necessary to prevent the misuse and illicit traffic in the leaves of the cannabis plant. So, in the leaves. So all of what Article 23 requires is currently captured within our interim regulations. There's one entity for issuing licenses for the handling of ganja, that is us. We designate areas and plots on which ganja can be cultivated. And we have a tripartite agreement that, though theoretically and not literally, it allows the CLA to take possession of the ganja that is being handled. And this is something that the same Single Convention requires, that all ganja that is being cultivated should essentially be passed in the hands of the regulator. Interestingly enough, and I want to note this, the Single Convention doesn't have a specific article that treats with cannabis itself. What the Single Convention has done is almost kind of by the way say, oh, treat cannabis the same way you treat opium poppy. And the system of controls for opium poppy, let that apply to cannabis. So I think our local legislation goes a bit further and treats cannabis in its own unique way. What does all this mean? As said before, for the first time, ganja can be used as a medicine and as a sacrament, as it has been used by our forefathers for well over a century, even in the heights of prohibition. But importantly, it does not mean that we can use ganja recreationally. With our traditional knowledge of ganja, I think Jamaica is poised to be a leader in the current medicinal cannabis industry, but it must find creative ways to bridge the gap between modern science and research with its traditional knowledge. So example, I remember listening to Dr. Jelani Naya, and he was saying that ITAL is a standard. And I think that's something to be looked at. Maybe we should look at how ganja was cultivated as a medicine by our forefathers as a possible standard that makes Jamaica different. And I know Miss Bellamy will speak about possibly having ganja as a geographical indication. Am I getting it right? And the patenting of our indigenous strains. These are things I think we should look to. Also, Jamaica's legal history with ganja, I think, has prepared it for the legal and economic future of ganja. And I believe the current regime has given us the green light. Green light. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So as we move along, just to the idea of what I'm going to talk about is looking at some of the opportunities that will present itself as, of course, the industry grows. And I think we will have to make use of the possible opportunities, you know, regardless of the restrictions, right?
Not regardless.
Yes, just kidding. All right, so as you know, the world is experiencing now, as we call it, a new green economy. And this is basically centered around the use of cannabis as a medicinal product. And we could even coin this as a medical cannabis revolution. You know, had the green revolution way back, an industrial revolution. Of course, we're possibly moving into a medical cannabis revolution. So this industry, of course, is expanding quite rapidly. It's moving very, very quickly. And if we don't look, we'll be probably left behind. Well, we hope not. And today, we have some 30 plus countries that has given the green light to medical cannabis, as well as others to allow medical cannabis use within very strict guidelines, including Jamaica. And this just gives you some idea of the countries. Of course, as we know, Canada recently legalized both for recreational use and for medicinal use. And of course, in Uruguay, it's completely legal, of course, also. Right? So just looking at some of the big producers in this industry, one might not see it very much in the media, but UK is one of the biggest producers. Right? Canada, which follows, Portugal, Israel, of course, which has been in the business for a very, very long time, and Netherlands and Chile. Top exporters, again, you never imagine the UK is a big exporter. Right? And following, of course, Netherlands and Austria. Some of the biggest companies that are involved in the business. Canopy Growth out of Canada. And you'll see a lot of these companies are basically from Canada. GW Pharmaceuticals, it's a UK-based company, and they have a couple of products on the market, of course. Epidiolex, which is a recent product for refractory childhood epilepsies. Right? MedRelief, again a Canadian company. Right? And as you can see, the numbers behind the market capitalization for these companies. And these are in billions of dollars. iFair, which is again another Canadian company. So revenues basically has been projected by 2025 to be somewhere in $55.8 billion in terms of cannabis. And of course, retail sales of legal cannabis products in North America alone is expected to be up to $25 billion by 2021. Right? So this industry is not a small industry. Right? And looking at Canada, again, recreational retail use or sales expected by 2021 to be some 4.5 billion alone for Canada. So this is a real industry. However, unlike most other industries, the cannabis industry is more complex and diverse, mainly because it is still illegal. And this creates, of course, many challenges in doing business. So although the challenges, you have challenges, of course, it also creates a new, diverse in terms of business opportunities. So looking at these areas, agricultural technology, biotechnology, marketing, financial, of course, medicine and health, testing, analyst for quality assurance, transportation, security, again, computing and software for the design of the security systems. So as you can see, this is just a small fraction of the areas you can look to in terms of developing just based on cannabis industry alone. So just going through very quickly, just to look at some of the specific areas. So in cultivation and retail, again, where we're looking at are bartenders, for example. There's a shortage in Canada, I understand, of people to trim and clean up and those things. So maybe Jamaica can start training more horticulturists, right? Right, nurseries, again, looking at plants. Right? So this is some area that we probably need to focus on. Agricultural technology, business that support innovation and development. Equipment that is using greenhouse technology, automated fertilizer system, greenhouse technologies like lighting, improved lighting systems. So most of these greenhouses are basically what we call hybrids, so they're not closed, but they use both natural light and artificial light. Again, we know that is to extend the vegetative growth of the plants during short daylight. So there are many, many areas that we can look at in terms of these technologies. Biopharmaceuticals. Again, pharmaceutical application of cannabis by developing specific strains that target certain illnesses and diseases. Very important in the industry, of course, are stable genetics of the plants. You want to ensure that today you plant one strain producing a certain amount of THC CDB. Same strain you want to plant weeks to come and weeks to come and months to come, it will produce the same quality in terms of what you expect the plant to produce. Again, key is disease-free plants. We know some of the challenges for greenhouse cultivation, especially in our hot, humid environments like ours. You tend to get mold, which is a major challenge in greenhouses. Of course, we need more researchers. Again, as we mentioned, the biochemists, the analysts, right? Biochemists, analysts, and toxicologists. So those are some of the areas we probably need to start focusing on now to ensure that we have the cadre of people to support the industry. Consulting services. Again, we need more consultants to assist with helping regulation, licensing, zoning, advising on design, operational procedures, in agronomy, pest management, and of course research. So we definitely need to look at these. Of course, dispensaries. These are going to come on stream, so we need to have people who are trained, of course, that can dispense the right strain for the right illnesses, and know about the strain itself, not just arbitrarily giving somebody a strain. So new products, again, this is where development will come in. So as we know, many companies are now looking at producing new drinks, right? Essentially trying to replace those sugary drinks that will now have more CDB and less sugar. So we're looking at that. So CDB beverages also can take the form of in water, sparkling water, tea, coffee, energy shots, beer, wine, and even more. So there's a big room, of course, for product development. It's not just about the THC. In pet industry, again, pet CDB focused brands. Right? There's a company called Pet Relief, RELEF. Right? So they have gained traction in the market so far with their CDB brands. Again, this is something that we again need to look at. So it's not just straight medicinal for human use, but opportunities for other areas. Topicals, again, when it comes to specializing formulas, tailor-made for beauty, skincare, sports medicine industries, those are some of the things we really need to look at. New plant genetics. So again, the competition might be where you can come up with a new strain that is very unique, different from others, that will propel your market or your company. Right? So this is where the plant breeders will again come in and work towards getting these new strains and stable strains. So the recognition, of course, will be the brand. Right? And importantly, of course, if you can produce a strain with high THC, CDB, again, with higher concentration when you extract, that will reduce your cost of production. So these are the things we need to look at. To wrap up, again, this was just taken from the Gleaner, from our Senator. Move hard and fast on green gold. Senator wants Jamaica to step up pace to cash in on the ganja. Thank you very much.
Afternoon. For as long as I can remember, I've heard that Jamaica has the best ganja in the world, best quality, high grade. But now comes a time when we have to define that best quality. When we think of quality, generally we think of fitness for purpose, meeting customer needs, customer satisfaction, absence of defects or deficiencies, value for money, and of course, conformance to standards. Quality standards are defined as documents that provide requirements or specifications, guidelines, or characteristics that can be used consistently to ensure that materials, products, processes, and services are fit for their purpose. They are an agreed way of doing things. Let's look at, for example, the application of pesticides. If the standard stipulates no banned pesticides shall be used on plants, then a consumer using your product will be assured that the plant does not contain any banned pesticides. And if you choose to be guided by a standard that prohibits the use of all pesticides, then the end user should be guaranteed pesticide-free product. Quality standards therefore form an objective basis for organizations and consumers around the world to communicate and conduct business. Standards are were non-existent for cannabis. Why? Because cannabis was and still is in most countries illegal. Europe and Canada are possibly the only sovereign states that have fully legalized the consumption and sale of recreational cannabis nationwide. Now that cannabis and its chemical derivatives are increasingly recognized as effective medicines for the treatment of a wide variety of ailments, this creates the need to bring a greater consistency and standardization to the cannabis marketplace. Standards for medicinal cannabis are just now being written for all aspects of the industry, from cultivating to dispensing to lab testing to patient education. Several groups have begun doing this, including the Foundation of Cannabis Unified Standard, FOCUS, the American Herbal Products Cannabis Association, AHPA, and the ASTM International. Founded by the American Society for Testing and Materials, it's a non-profit organization that develops and publishes approximately 12,000 technical standards, covering the procedures for testing and classification of materials of every sort. ASTM standards are used worldwide, and its membership consists of over 30,000 members, representing 135 countries. In February of 2017, ASTM International formed a committee focusing on creating technical standards and guidance materials for cannabis and its products and processes. The committee will focus on 6 technical areas, forming subcommittees: indoor and outdoor horticulture and agriculture, quality management systems, laboratory, processing and handling, security and transportation, personnel training, assessment, and credentialing. Jamaica, through the Jamaica Bureau of Standards, has been invited by ASTM International to join the committee responsible for drafting the D37 Global Cannabis Standards. The Jamaican executive team is chaired by Mr. Rory Liu, right there, a Jamaican processor and a member of the Licensed Cannabis Association. Also on the team are facilitator Celia Johnson and our vice chairman, Dr. Michelle Emmanuel from the University of the West Indies. The technical committee and working groups has representatives from 20 stakeholders: the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries, Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Science and Technology, Ministry of Labor and Social Security, Cannabis Licensing Authority, Rural Agricultural Development Authority, National Environmental and Planning Agency, the National Commission on Science and Technology, SRC, Scientific Research Council, University of the West Indies, University of Technology, College of Agricultural Science and Education, National Compliance and Regulatory Authority, the Jamaica National Agency for Accreditation, the National Council on Drug Abuse, Jamaica Intellectual Property Office, Jamaica Promotions Corporation, Jamaica Licensed Cannabis Association, Ganja Growers and Producers Association of Jamaica. There's also there's a voice for everyone on this team. And the first working group meetings were held in January of 2019. I see in the audience a lot of my grower and processor friends. So I know the question is going to be, how long before these standards are prepared? 6 months, a year? Well, Mr. Liu is here, so maybe he can answer when the time comes for that discussion. But be assured that we are not writing these standards from scratch. We're adapting and revising the international standards and making sure that they are relevant to Jamaica. Well, how will your voice be heard, farmers, growers? Well, please ensure that you join one of these groups or get associated affiliation with one of these groups. What will a standard look like? The standard for cultivation, for example. The detailed standard is to guide cultivators to producing safe plants and to have productive growing. The standard requires the cultivator to demonstrate management responsibilities, worker training, production planning, use of propagation material, soil management, irrigation, fertilizer use, pest management, traceability, security, product testing, equipment, waste management, harvest practices, product handling, and worker health and safety. So until the standards are ready, what can I do? Start by implementing good manufacturing practices. These will assure that your products are of high quality and do not pose any risk to the consumer or the public in general. A basic tenet for GMP is that quality cannot be tested into a product. It must be built into each batch of product during all stages of the manufacturing processes. Second recommendation is to use the available resources, the Bureau of Standards, UE, RADA. They will provide the professional help and assist you in addressing quality proactively at each step in the process. Do your research, stay current. Next week, I go on a trip to Florida to learn about the new ISO 17025 standard for lab competence, because that's my area of expertise. Just today, when I got my flashing on my phone, it says they found lead in some of the vape pens in Canada, and toxic lead, toxic amount. So you have to stay current with what's happening out there. So I have to now think of ways how we can get this lead testing business started right away. So in wrapping up, by meeting and eventually exceeding quality standards, our medicinal cannabis will be ranked, I think, among the best in the world, much like our rum and our coffee and our music. Then and only then can we say with confidence that the Jamaican cannabis is indeed high grade. We owe it to Manly West, we owe it to Albert Lockhart, we owe it to the Rastafarians, we owe it to our grandparents who used to use the white rum to cure them and the ganja to cure many ailments. Come, let's take it to them.
Thanks for coming out. It's a real honor to be here on this distinguished panel. I never thought in my younger days I would be able to participate in something like this, so it's a great honor and a privilege to be here. I've been involved in the cannabis industry in Canada since about 2003, so I've been to a lot of cannabis events, a lot of conferences, a lot of business seminars, a lot of presentations, CMEs, you name it. But one of the things I have seen consistently is that a lot of times the basics are overlooked. And I really, in this presentation, I titled it Cannabis Confusion, because one of the things I really wanted to do was just kind of address some of the basic things about cannabis that I've found people seem to have been confused about the most over the years. So, away we go. Okay, so what we're talking about here today. The first one is going to be the difference between hemp and ganja. Next is what is indica and sativa. The next I'll be briefly talking about cannabinoids, especially THC and CBD. A brief talk on international markets. And then for Jamaica, of course, everyone's asking, are things moving too slow? So first off, hemp and ganja. Really, the difference is the definition. Hemp was defined to allow the production of the non-cannabinoid-bearing parts of the cannabis plant for industrial and commercial uses. This includes the seeds, the stems, and the roots. It is only for industrial and food use, and international standards range for defining hemp based on the jurisdiction from anywhere from 0.1% THC up to 3% THC in the plant. Ganja was originally defined to prohibit the production of the cannabinoid-bearing parts of the cannabis plant. This includes the leaves and the flowering tops. The uses for this typically have been recreational, spiritual, and medical, and generally there are higher THC levels above 3%. Then again, I would say 3% THC is pretty low for a marijuana plant. But underneath all of that, it is really all just cannabis. Indica and sativa. There's a debate about the psychoactivity because if you consider anti-anxiety effects psychoactive, it is psychoactive. However, it is promising for a variety of conditions, and there's a lot of research going on to see what its therapeutic potential is. THC, which is tetrahydrocannabinol, is the only natural euphoric cannabinoid. So it's technically the only one in the plant that will get you high. THC, though, has been widely studied for many years and actually has very strong evidence of therapeutic action and has had a pharmaceutical called dronabinol released to prove that it has clinical efficacy. As I mentioned earlier, these cannabinoids all act on the endocannabinoid system in the body, which every single one of us has. It actually is an essential system for life, and it produces its own endogenous cannabinoids, with one being called anandamide, which is actually similar to THC in its effects and structure in the body. The endogenous cannabinoid system is actually responsible for maintaining homeostatic balance in your body, which just means it keeps all the systems in balance and working properly. And the entourage effect of multiple cannabinoids appears to increase the efficacy. So what that means is the many different cannabinoids in the cannabis plant mixed together appears to increase the efficacy of each individual cannabinoid. However, it's still really just cannabis. Okay, so another interesting discussion that everyone likes to talk about are international markets. International markets are a long way off, not only physically, but in time-wise. The establishment of this market internationally, really a lot of it has been done predicated on an export model and being able to grow in a country and export internationally. So of the 30 countries that Wayne had mentioned earlier, I'd say 29 of them are expecting to export medical cannabis. So there'll be a lot of competition in the sector, but further to that, because it is a controlled drug, there's a lot of regulations, there's a lot of quality assurance, as we've been speaking to earlier, that goes into producing it to international standards, GMP, as mentioned earlier. However, there's also issues around just the quality of the Health Act that's in place in order to be able to interface with the international markets. So the international trade is controlled by the International Narcotics Control Board. As was mentioned before, it was created from a series of treaties that began with a single convention in 1961, but actually the prohibition goes back further. There are many barriers to the trade, including a quota system for international trade. So every country gets assigned a quota every year as to how much they can import or export. Only medical cannabis is allowed, no recreational. So the Canadian system has a recreational component. It has a shortage of cannabis, but it is outside of international law, so there is no legal framework for anyone to send weed to Canada to sell within it. Pharmaceutical standards include GMP, so once again, for any of the exports from Canada to Europe which have occurred, they've all had to reach EU GMP standard, which means they're produced in an incredibly expensive facility under crazy standards, and it's very difficult to actually meet. And the auditing process for that alone typically takes anywhere from 6 months to a year once you're already in production. Okay, so because of this, there's going to be many years for change. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, but for commercial exports, you'd be really lucky to see it happening within 5 years. Realistically, probably more 10. But then also Jamaica will have to position itself in terms of redoing its Health Act and also lobbying for its own position within the quota system to be successful. Okay, so of course, at the end we'll get to, are things moving too slow? So this just seems to be a question that always comes up in everywhere I go, not just Jamaica. So Canada, States, everywhere. However, this is a new industry, and it does appear to be moving rapidly globally, but this is kind of an illusion. The perception of Jamaica as being left behind or moving slow is definitely not really supported by the facts. Creating a regulatory framework that fits the unique circumstances of Jamaica is very difficult. There's a long-standing outside of the framework industry that needs to be considered. There's a lot of consideration around people's sensitivity towards cannabis and the stigma that still is quite heavy in the island. For reference, California first allowed medical marijuana in 1996. That's when it was first allowed. It wasn't until 2003 that legislation actually created a framework by which an industry could start to function in that. And it was really a cottage industry. It was not a commercial industry. However, it took till 2018 till cannabis was finally legalized in California. So you're talking a process of 22 years of having a legal framework to develop the industry and to emerge as a cannabis producer. Canada allowed medical marijuana in 1999, so just a few years after that, through a court decision. It created an industry in 2014, so it waited 15 years to actually create a legal framework that would allow for the commercial production and distribution of cannabis, and then subsequently legalized in 2018. So for comparison, Jamaica, it allowed medical and sacramental cannabis in 2015 is when the Dangerous Drugs Act amendment passed. And the industry started in 2017. So you're dealing with a 2-year time period where things got going really quickly, in spite of international pressure to the contrary, in spite of lack of funding for the regulator. So really what's happened in Jamaica in terms of having licensed dispensaries and distribution is a miracle. Canada is legalized, well in Ontario where I'm from, we legalized in October, I guess it was, and we still don't have a physical outlet where you can go and buy recreational cannabis from, right? So what's going on here may appear to be slow. I know everybody's excited, I'm excited, but actually you guys are moving at light speed, so I just wanted to make sure that that was apparent. And in the end, I really want to thank everyone for coming out today. And please remember, whether it's ganja or hemp, indica or sativa, really it's all just cannabis. And we just have to figure out how to deal with that plant properly. So thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks again for coming out. Basically, we operate scarce commodity, and I'm also a part of the Department of Economics. What I'm going to present to you today are some data that we collected from the various cannabis festivals across the country. It's a student project, so myself, my COO, Dr. Emmanuel, and Dr. Knife, we put together a questionnaire instrument, and this instrument is given to cannabis consumers, cannabis farmers, cannabis products producers, as well as retailers, to get a better idea of the local platform and to use the data to make more informed decisions as to where the industry is headed. To begin with, we first asked them about how their view is on the legislative process. As you can realize, 55% of our respondents want to see full legalization, followed by 24% who wants legalization with loose controls. If we add those numbers together, 80% of the cannabis advocates and cannabis users in the country want us to legalize or legalize with minimal controls. Now, legalization with strict controls, 12%, decriminalization, 5%, and only 2% did not agree that we need to move forward. Now, I begin with cannabis consumers, and we administer straight across the country. My students, we have a lot of them. I have a class called Social and Economic Accounting, and it's these students who we use to administer the questionnaire as well as to put the data together. The 73% of cannabis consumers are males, 26 are females. Don't worry if I'm going too fast, you only have 10 minutes. I'll make this available for you after. Now, when you look at location, 41% of cannabis users are rural, while 58% are urban. So when you look at how cannabis is being consumed, our respondents are saying that more of the cannabis users live in or reside or are part of urban areas than rural areas. If you're looking at the purpose of use, for recreation, we have 24%, for medicinal only, 11%, for sacramental, just 5%, for recreational and medical, 9%, and for all of the above, 44%. So 44% of our respondents use cannabis for all three, recreational, medicinal, and sacramental. If we look at their preferred way of using, then 40% is through smoking, 9% through edibles, and this is domestic, so even though edibles are banned, we still have a budding industry, people are being producing. Carol does a lot of the testing and so on and so forth to try as best as possible to make sure that whatever is being used is still being done responsibly. Smoking and edibles 15%, 8% is all, and then the others are scattered. Vaping, that's the same thing as steaming, 8% use vapes only or steam only, and so on and so forth. As it relates to where do you buy cannabis, 32% of people buy from farmers, 32% buy it on what we call the high grade ends. What we did was to distribute it between different types of retailers. The high grade ends is sort of like the manicure, then the stall, then the farmer, and so on and so forth. 5.5% of our respondents purchase cannabis from dispensary. If you just look at high grade ends and farmer, 4%, and then the remainder of the data marginally distributed across the other intersects. Now, if we're looking at how much they spend to buy cannabis per week, how much you spend to buy cannabis per week, then 38% spend less than 500 Jamaican dollars. That's 38% of cannabis consumers. If you're looking at a dispensary style type of sale, then if you're looking at an average price of a gram, which is about $10 US, then these 38% would not be able to participate in that particular model willingly because they only spend 500 per week. 31% spend between 600 and 2,000 per week, 12% between $2,000 and $5,000 per week, and 14% spend more than $5,000 per week purchasing cannabis. If we look at how often they buy, 65% purchase cannabis 1 to 3 times. 12% of our respondents purchase cannabis between 4 and 6 times. 20% purchase 7 times or more. And this is like a per day method. So 7 times would mean that you buy at least once per day. If we look at the farming data, this is the farming data. We're looking at age. So this is the age of the farmers. And this, we also corroborated this data with the data in the United States. We get to realize that they're very similar. 22% of our farmers are between the ages of 18 and 25. 28% between the ages of 26 and 33. 19% between the ages of 34 and 41. And 29% over the age of 40. So we realize that cannabis, the farming community, is quite evenly distributed across the different age groups. If we look at sex, 18% of our cannabis farmers appear to be female in this case, and 81% are male based on survey responses. If we're looking at location, then we have 36% of farmers located in the urban 36% of farmers located in the urban area, while 63% are located in the rural area. So this is important for policy because while we have more of the production taking place in the rural area, we have more of the consumption taking place in the urban area, and so on and so forth. As it relates to size of farms, in terms of acres, then 18% are the 2.25 acre, 23% half an acre, 23% 1 acre. If you look at the more large-scale production, 4% of our farmers produce on 30 acres or more, 2% on 15 acres, 2% on 11 acres, and from 3 acres all the way up, we have 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%, 2%. So this has implication as well for how we distribute our license. I know the CLA has a tier 5 license for 5 acres, but we have people producing on 6 acres, 10 acres, 11 acres, 15 acres, and so on. Tier 3, and so on and so forth. Where do you grow? So this was a question we wanted to find out the indigenous landscape as well as the emerging medical marijuana business. 67% grow cannabis in Jamaica in an open field. 6% grows in greenhouses. 6% a combination of greenhouse and open field. 18% grow indoor, and 1% uses all 3 methods. If we're looking at how do they propagate, then this is important for Dr. Emmanuel as well. He was very interested in this part of the questionnaire. 66% grows from seeds, 25% grow from clones, and then 8% grows from both seeds and clones. If we're looking at source of seeds, where do they get these seeds? They're very important. 13% import seeds, 22% breed their own seeds, 49%, close to 50% of the seeds are local, and then the remainder is distributed between different intersections of these categories. If we look at how do you cure your cannabis, post-harvesting of the flowers is very important to maintain standards. So we're interested in finding out how they cure their cannabis. 40% uses neither AC vent or dehumidifier. They just hang them in a shade house. Dr. Emmanuel can tell you that probably this is a no-no, especially if we want to standardize and to maintain the quality of the plants that are post-harvested. 10% uses dehumidifier, 25% uses vent, 20% uses air conditioning units. And then the remainder marginal effects are distributed across the others. Now, if we want to look at input costs, how much goes into your production process, then we realize that here, an input cost of $10,000, 10% of our farmers say that they have an input cost of $10,000. That's depending on the size of their farm. 8% has an input cost of $50,000, while 7% has an input cost of $100,000. We have a maximum input cost here, and I would suppose that this is a 30-acre farm or some large greenhouse or indoor production. 1.2 million, 3% is 820,000, and basically it's distributed from $450 all the way to 1.2 million. If we look at the average crop yield, very important as well. Average crop yield, important. 10% of our farmers say that they get 5 pounds from their production process. 1% get up to 8,000 pounds. 8% get about 150 pounds, and so on and so forth. So we have a very dispersed distribution as it relates to crop yield across the length and breadth of the island. Maybe for future research, what we'll have them do is to try to show us, but the farmers don't have this information. So we'll have to go and help them to get this information, which is crop yield per acre. So what we've had to do is to make estimates and so on and so forth. Average price per pound, and it ranges from $500 to $90,000. Our modes are $9,000 and $5,000. These appear to be the more wholesale sold plant-based material. 10,000 also very close to the mode, but you realize that depending on the quality and depending on where it is sold, cannabis, the price per pound ranges from $500 all the way to $90,000. Now, intended market, very important. When you produce cannabis, where is it going? Who is consuming? And we see here for local market, we have 44% of the cannabis is distributed locally, 36% exported. Yeah, whether legally or illegally. Jamaica forms a significant part of the regional as well as the global cannabis distribution chains. Regionally, we ask regionally 5%, regionally 4% both local, international, and 7% says all. So if we were supposed to take away from this, only 44% or close to 44% remains here in the domestic market. If we're looking at how much you would pay for a license, 45% says $0. We have a 2%. I think this is important for the CLA. 2% of the respondents would pay up to $500,000. More than say 20% would pay over $50,000, and so on and so forth. Only 9% would pay $10,000, and this is in Jamaican dollars, ladies and gentlemen. This is not US. If we're looking at tax revenue, very important for the government as well. Respondents were asked how much would you be willing from your revenue to contribute to fiscal sustainability. 21% said $0, and that's the mode. However, if you want to look at 1%, 11% said they want to contribute 1%. 15% said they would contribute 10%. 2% said they would pay 28% in taxes. 6% would pay 16%. 6% would also pay 15%, and so on and so forth. So I'll pass this information to the CLA so that they will be better able to make their particular. How long have you been cultivating? And it goes on and on and on. Now, this is overall retailers. This pie chart is showing the retailers. 43% of our retailers are between the age of 18 and 25. 37% between the age of 26 and 33, and only 18% of our retailers are above the age of 40. And as it relates to retail, 93% are male and 6% female. I want to thank you so much for giving us this opportunity. We conduct surveys at various cannabis events. We have our own, and it's called the Scarce Festival. Please tell Dr. Delahaye to give us a medical permit so that we can host the event in peace without the police. We are merely collecting data that is going to help the country to move forward. Thank you.
So you might just have to listen to me, and after that presentation, that's a tough act to follow. Okay, I'm from the Intellectual Property Office, and the Jamaica Intellectual Property Office is actually an agency of the Ministry of Industry, Commerce, Agriculture and Fisheries. I thought it was necessary to mention that because we're looking at trade, basically, and intellectual property. Thank you, my darling. Okay, cool. It's a good thing we live in Jamaica, because I call everybody darling. If I was elsewhere, I'd be in trouble. Yeah, all right. All right. Oh, you run away and leave me. Which one I must push? Just this one down here?
Sure. This one, forward, backward.
Forward, backward.
Yes.
Cool. All right. So this is our vision and our mission. I have 10 minutes, so I'm not going to read it. But basically, we are, as far as we are concerned, the best IP office in the region. Yes, thank you, Joan. Yes, we are. Okay. The only thing that's holding us up back is that some of our laws are not where they should be, but thank God we went to LegCom with one that is of great significance and relevance to the ganja industry in January, and we're hoping that it will be tabled in Parliament in February, this month. And I put green on this finger there for the green goal that we're working with, okay? Yes, moving right along. Okay, so I don't have to go into this but just to show you how the ministry and Jipo work together. So basically it's about improving competitiveness globally and locally, as well as diversifying local production along the value chain. So you know what I'm talking about when we speak about local production. I don't think that's what they were conceptualizing at the time, but that's how I interpret it. And just to share, when I joined Jipo in 2007, for those of you who might remember that far back, we were in the middle of negotiating the CARIGEN Forum, right? The Economic Partnership Agreement among countries of CARICOM plus the Dominican Republic. So we were supposed to exchange a list of geographical indications from Jamaica. So I came to the office all excited and I did my list. We consulted and then I added ganja on the list. So of course, I was the Deputy Director Legal Counsel at the time, and I was met in the office with, Lilyclaire, you mad? I said, no. I said, we have 2 patented products that were developed when ganja was illegal, so why can't we have it as a geographical indication? So I sent it off. Anyway, I got a lot of pushback from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I said to them, let's share it with them and let them tell us it can't be on the list, right? So I've lived in this lifetime of working at Jipo, and I think you mentioned it, to this wonderful document from the European Union, which is their directive on ganja. Moving right along. So, and the thing is, if you go anywhere, if you go into Geneva and you're visiting, there's a street where you see the signs and it's available, and our name is being used, which is part of the problem. So if they're using our name, we may as well get some of the profit. Okay, moving right along. This now becomes critical and important because people speak about intellectual property as if it is theirs. It's only yours if you have something, right? Something tangible. So it says intangible property. This is from the Dictionary of Law. Since, did you know that if you say you're a lawyer, that's contrary to ethics? Yeah, you're not supposed to say it. You're supposed to make people discover it, so I'm not saying it. So intangible property, that includes patents, trademarks, copyright, and registered and unregistered designs, right? That's the Dictionary of Law definition. WIPO, which is the World Intellectual Property Organization, which is the UN body that deals with intellectual property, they speak about it as creations of the mind, which is a much more nicer definition. Inventions, literary and artistic works, symbols, names, images used in commerce. That's the critical part of this definition. So now we come to the actual forms of intellectual property. So we have industrial designs. Usually you have industrial designs, you have copyright and related rights. And more recently, that last bullet point, GR, TK, and TCE, WIPO has been looking at the intellectual property that's associated with those 3 areas because, as you can imagine, if you go back in time, and it's still happening, we have knowledge that we don't think it is relevant and important. So depending on who approaches you, you give them that information. Then one day, they might send you back a thank you, which is a book, which includes all of the knowledge that you shared with them, or they may come up with a product or a process based on what you told them. But the unfortunate thing is, thank you, okay. Yeah, you didn't take the necessary steps to protect it, and until, remember, if you don't put it in a format, you can say it is yours, and they've used it. What they've done is wrong, immoral and unethical, but not necessarily illegal. So you have to be careful who you share your knowledge and your information with. So all of that shows you the different forms of intellectual property that are available. And when my economist, who is on his phone, and I'm jealous because he's not listening to me like how I listen to him, but that's like geographical indications. Anyway, moving right along. He spoke about the ganja, right? And the need for you to have all these things in place. That's what you get with a geographical indication. That was not a very forensic way of saying it. But basically what it is you establish a standard and you say this is what you'll get every time you get that GI. So champagne is perhaps the most well-known GI that's out there. So these are the relevant intellectual property laws that can deal with ganja. Fine. When you were making your presentation, you have to remember sometimes when something is illegal, it facilitates the intellect. So it was illegal when in 1978 to have, but Manly West and Albert Lockhart, they did the research at the time and they came up with two, one cannasol and one asmosol, which I could use right now. And both of those were patented, right? And it's interesting, I don't know if I can answer this, but it was very interesting because at the time, the properties of the cannasol were so good, a major pharmaceutical company wanted it and they couldn't get it, and then you know what happened. You know, like if you're in a man-woman relationship and she don't want you and you want her, then she's horrible, moving right along. So that's what we had. But then now, we've had 12 applications this year, 10 from Jamaicans and 2 from the United States of America for process patents. And all of what you were speaking about is what they're seeking the process patents for. The pharmaceuticals, I can't tell you what they are for, so I'll just give you the generic diseases of the eyes, the lungs, and pain relief. And 2 nutraceuticals. So when you're talking about what I was thinking, one way we can use it is we trade in the product, since it might be hard for us right now to trade in the actual product. All right, that's just to show you a fancy graph, moving right along. Trademarks now, this is the interesting area. And this is an area where I'm happy as long as it stays illegal in the US, because then people can use our system and we can earn some money. So we accept registrations for trademarks, and I must tell you, historically, we were doing this before we were supposed to be doing it. And don't ask if we never get in trouble. So then we had to defend ourselves and say we were just accepting them, but we weren't processing them. So we would accept the applications, but we didn't process the applications because we can't contract outside the law. So the people would come in with wonderful things to be trademarked. But what we did was, and the thing is, you know, if you explain to policymakers, you stand a better chance. So I went to the heads meeting and I said, yeah, but the people want to protect the product. They're not selling ganja. It's just a t-shirt that they have it on. Yes, I see it. Thank you. Anyway, I should pretend I never see it like some of the other speakers. Anyway, yeah, but then I'm a woman. I wouldn't do that. So products, in trademarks, you can protect products or you can protect services. So you can hang up a sign offering a service. So we have 33 registered trademarks right now. 16 are local and the others are international. We have 60 pending. 30 of them are Jamaican. I spoke about the GIs in passing, but we have 2 protected GIs in Jamaica, Jamaica rum and Jamaica jerk, and ganja can be a GI. And the thing with it, the important thing to know with the GI is you can have ganja and you can have the ganja GI, which will be at a higher standard, because there's an established standard that the Bureau of Standards will have. And then for your GI, you go a bit higher. So you show that you have the better product. Okay, copyright now. There's no need, it didn't matter whether the law banned it or not, because copyright deals with stuff like this, a book. And this is an example of a book that mentions actually ganja in it. Produced by someone here at UWI and somebody outside. The critical thing with copyright though, it must be an original work. And people have done research and papers. What you need to do is to get your name out there so that people associate with you with the product. And the way to protect, well, once it's in a tangible format, your copyright automatically comes into place. We have a voluntary registry at Jipo. You can pay a few dollars and you get a certificate, which might come in helpful for you if somebody claims your work as theirs. This one though, breeders of new varieties. So I was very interested to hear about all of those breeders, if they're coming up with an actual new variety, because we are far advanced in having a plant variety protection. We actually have the bill, and we're hoping. Thank you. Yeah. So, and I was having a discussion with the speaker before me. One of the criteria is it must be distinct, new, homogeneous, and stable. He says that you can't really have strict stability, but stable in inverted commas, so that if you plant it today, you get something similar the next day. We have the intellectual property that's associated with GRTK. So historically, and this was mentioned before, so I'm not going to mention it again, the traditional uses that we have done, that we have shared with others, and which they have used in their research to come up with actual products. So we need to be careful who, my message is, be careful who you share your information with, because then when the product comes out, it's going to be hard for you to prove that you were the one who really formed the genesis of that idea. And that's it. So intellectual property rights and cannabis, where are we? The Jamaica Intellectual Property Office is available, and we have been protecting your intellectual property if you make the application and if what you have is yours. So don't come in here with anything that don't belong to you, because somebody will oppose it and it won't be pretty. But it has to be something that you have. I can't just get up here and say, I have intellectual property rights in something and I don't have anything. So you need to have something. When you come into our office for the trademark, you need to say, this is what you want to trademark, and then we will, you need to have the book or the music or whatever that speaks to the subject. But we welcome and we accept all applications. Thank you.
While serving in our Coast Guard, I'm very clear that ships reach their destination not just by speed, but with balance. And so I'll provide ballast as the last speaker in today's roundtable. Just want to share with Andre, very good data that you have. I'd suggest to you, I'm happy to facilitate, look at usage of emergency rooms around these ganja fests. Right? Okay. So my topic today, medicinal value, impact on health, and scheduling. We don't have very much time, so pardon me if I move through a couple of slides, but I usually speak very clearly, so you'll understand. So I only have 10 brethren. Medicinal use, it's been a long time since we've been using, in particular in our country, cannabis for medicinal value. Happy to report that medicinal cannabis is legal in Jamaica. More happy to report that having set up the medicinal cannabis unit in the Ministry of Health, we were able in a very short time to register 81 medicinal cannabis products. Number of areas, it is said internationally that there are potential medicinal uses of cannabis. It certainly starts to look like noni when you start to have all areas in this table being filled out. And so I'll go on to show the importance of research to validate these proposals. And we started in the late 20th century, Janabinal, one of the products. If I had time, I'd go into it, but that continued into the 21st century. In italics, I've placed there's an increasing body of evidence, because the nature of that body of evidence is what drives FDA approval of products. Research, again in italics, and the benefits of cannabis, the kind of research, very important. So increasingly so, the point of the slide is more and more areas are being considered and looked at to be treated with cannabis. And then, of course, in the 21st century, further on, the AMA supports future clinical research of medicinal uses of marijuana while using a wide-scale approach. The question is what kind of research is needed for FDA approval. And that happens to be randomized, placebo-controlled, double-blind clinical trials. The current Minister of Health and myself made big representation at the World Health Assembly on 3 occasions in Geneva, canvassing other countries throughout the world to have the WHO look at cannabis a little more seriously. They had started, but of course it doesn't hurt if you have some amount of drive to ensure that this is done. And we're happy to say that they followed through with that. I'm not in that process anymore, having left the Ministry of Health, but when I hear the comments coming from the committees looking at these products, I feel really very proud that small Jamaica has been an integral part of this whole trend. There are a number of pharmaceutical products derived from cannabinoids, and we'll divide them into 4 large areas: drugs directly from the plant, drugs with synthetic versions like dronabinol, which we looked at, drugs with chemicals similar to those in cannabis but not in the plant, and then the 4th and last, drugs which do not work like cannabis but utilize the same pathways. So just to share with you the different areas of drugs, and if I had time, I'd go through these slides. Happy to leave the presentation with the organizers. But let me then get to the concept of the entourage effect. So we recognize that having just a particular component of cannabis like THC or CBD isn't necessarily where you get most value. You need what we call a combination of these products, or we term the ensemble or entourage effect, which is very important in the efficacy of the product. And so therein lies the whole issue of combinations and the levels at which you allow these combinations to be present. For the medicinal cannabis unit, as I left it, our upper limit was 5%. There's a reason for that, because it's at 4 or 5% that the potential negatives of cannabis come into play. And so we took a responsible approach. Countries go between 3 and 15%, but those are countries in the 8, 10, 15 who have had 20, 25 years, like in the Haye, of using medicinal cannabis. And also, I must point out, have a very excellent mental health system. We don't have that. Some recent developments, we're looking at clinical trials, including what I'm principal investigator for here in pain management, but looking at clinical trials using post-traumatic stress disorder. Being an ex-military myself, I have a vested interest in that, and we're now at an advanced stage of discussions. We're doing some of those clinical trials here at the University Hospital. Using medicinal cannabis to fight the opioid epidemic, we're also at an advanced stage of dialogue in that area. And then transdermal patches being developed, inhalation devices being developed in Israel in particular. Some active studies, we've conducted one, the data entry has been collected, we're still looking at it. Open label phase 1 randomized 2-way crossover study evaluating the pharmacokinetics of prana P1, THC, and then a second one, which we just resubmitted to ethics, a prospective randomized placebo-controlled double-blind. Note, that's a kind of study the WHO needs to push your product forward. Trial to assess efficacy of adjunctive cannabinoid therapy in managing pain and symptoms of cancer in patients with malignant cancer. It is not many places in the world that we're embarking on these studies. Israel also does a few, and then in California they have a few more. Here's other references, they will be left here. Let's look at the second part of my presentation, the public health challenges with the use of cannabis. And Andre just told me we're using a data-driven approach, and I have some of that data to show. So historically, it was well accepted that there were potential challenges with cannabis. In 1000 AD, an Arabic text, and the title of which was On Poisons, warned against the use of hashish, including the fact that hashish could cause a human to, quote, become mute and blind and could lead to retching and death, unquote. Also, ancient Romans used marijuana medicinal as a pain-killing analgesic, yet, quote, warned that misuse or abuse of the herb would lead to possible impotence, unquote. Just sharing with you what we have in the literature. So the point is, persons recognize that there are potential challenges. The ethical debate really, though, to take it away from all of that, is mainly focused around the use of smoking medicinal cannabis, because smoking anything is hazardous to your health. It's for that reason why the FDA has no approved product, which is smoke. Main issue around cannabis usage. Some more concerns. Smoking concerns may be alleviated with the provision of alternative methods, creams, patches, capsules, drops. Vaping is one of those. Less harmful, but not entirely harmless, as we heard with a previous speaker. Medicinal versus recreational use, one of the challenge, the potential for misuse or addiction as you would know it, safety under medical supervision, and the need to develop suitable exclusion criteria for clinical studies. For example, persons who I treat with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder certainly could not be included in these trials. I share with you prevalence studies over about 25 years there at least, between 1987 and 2013. Not many Caribbean islands have this to show you. We have it. And what's alarming about this slide is the fact that the prevalence, this is lifetime prevalence, the question you ask is ever used. Very few countries in the world where the lifetime prevalence of cannabis use, look at these columns, approximates that of tobacco. It just doesn't happen in many countries. So we have a challenge to begin with. Data-driven, Andre, this is rare. There's a reason the DSM-5, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Diseases, carries specific diagnoses around cannabis, and they include cannabis intoxication, withdrawal, cannabis-induced psychotic disorder, cannabis-induced mood disorder, and anxiety disorder. They wouldn't be there if they didn't happen internationally. They go about designing the DSM-5 by looking at all countries in the world and the kind of illnesses that they have, and then compile this document with a criteria, and it's based on that that we make the diagnoses when we see patients. Other impact on health, certainly any discussion on regulatory approaches on cannabis must share the following objectives. Minimizing access, availability, and use by youths, the vulnerable generally, and that's by public education. It's where we have fallen down in this country in the worst way. Minimizing drug driving, minimizing cannabis use disorder or addiction as you know it, minimizing consumption of marijuana products with unwanted contaminants, obviously, and minimizing concurrent use of cannabis and alcohol, particularly in public settings, because we recognize in particular with motor vehicle accidents, that's a combination that creates the difficulties. The need for research, need for more supported research into the therapeutic role and safety of cannabis, which we are participating in, with greater research into its therapeutic benefits. Physicians and elsewhere, others will be able to better analyze that benefit, but not only the benefit, also the harmful side effects, what it represents, how to manage them, of marijuana use, because there are harmful side effects potentially. Lessons from the tobacco and alcohol industry includes attempt to limit marketing, to restrict public consumption, to measure and prevent impaired driving or drug driving. And just as an example, by restricting public consumption, there are two purposes that serves: to reduce secondhand exposure to smoked cannabis, reduce the extent to which marijuana use is seen by youth as socially acceptable or normative. Very important point to be made. Measure and prevent impaired driving, and in the interest of time, I'll just go right on to the final area, drug scheduling. Currently, cannabis scheduled as Schedule 1, and that means that there's no medicinal value, strictly speaking, and strong potential for addiction. We think that's wrong. The Committee on Cannabis Dependence in the WHO, they have looked at CBD in particular. They're very clear that it should be removed from Schedule 1, and they're now going through systematically and then provide that information to the UNOCD that having reviewed cannabis, specifically CBD, should be removed, and they might want to look at putting cannabis in Schedule 3, where you have other products which we use as medication, and I use them too. For example, Schedule 4 with the benzodiazepines. All physicians use Xanax, all physicians use Valium, and so on. And so the question is, why should those be appear in Schedule 4 with medicinal value when there are other products in cannabis with similar medicinal value? I think I can end with that. I think I've gotten the gist of the presentation across. Different regulatory requirements for each schedule. So for example, Xanax, which is addictive, and we use it, we have an amount above which we can't go per year. And this year, by September, October, we were at our limit, and patients just couldn't get the product. That's what regulation is about, ensuring that our country doesn't run away with itself and uses potentially harmful products ad lib. And I think I'll close with that. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we're high on knowledge. Let us try to do some questions. But before I do that, I don't want anybody to leave yet. So I'd like to invite you to the next talk. The next talk will be by Ambassador Bernal. He will be looking at the China-Jamaica capital connection. So how does the Chinese affect our economy? And we know that they are here and we've been doing a lot of business. That will be here at 5 o'clock, okay? So we'll have that. And I just want to acknowledge the persons who had done the decoration at the front. They asked me to just tell them that it was done by Winston. That is the University Nursing section, okay? So now we're open for discussion. Nice, clear discussion, and you can present it to whichever one of the speakers that just presented. So let us start, and I see a hand right here, so we'll start. Can we get mics, send the mics around? Right to the front in the 5th row.
Thank you very much to all of the presenters, and I will stop here because I know many others probably want to speak. I appreciated all of the input. Lilyclaire, you sharing the status of the varietals bill, and particularly your data, Mr. Haughton.
We haven't had any knowledge of this industry in terms of fact-based information. All right, I'll keep going. My question is really to Dr. Bellamy. First of all, I appreciated your presentation, particularly how you ended it, with noting that even in your position, you must know that it's necessary for reclassification of this drug to be moved from the schedule and the class that it's in now. But in your fact-based assessment, again, I appreciated it,
the references that were made. You were quoting Roman references, and I just wanted to highlight, you mentioned that your patients cannot be treated by this. But there's research from 2017 in Sydney. This is in university, this is PhD-based research that speaks about the ability to use cannabis-derived treatments for schizophrenia, for Alzheimer's, for a variety of psycho-related or psychoactive treatments. So I'm just wondering how it is that you're referring or relying on such dated kind of rhetoric when there are actual factual studies being done that really need to be given regard.
Thanks very much for your question. Nice question, I like it. I merely shared with you a little historical area to do with cannabis. I write a lot of medicinal cannabis products, including this morning. The point we're making is we use evidence-based studies, having worked like you have for your area of work, for my degree like I did. I don't think I readily accept a lawsuit for using a product that's not readily researched and indicated, very operative work, indicated for that area. So yes, I'm aware, and we'll happily participate in those trials of the use of CBD in particular for managing some areas of schizophrenia, but there's no product at this time that's approved for that kind of work.
Understood. I think it's helpful to share that as
well.
Sure.
All right, can we go ahead?
Microphone to the right here, to our left.
Go ahead.
Yes.
Okay. Questions for two persons. One, Dr. Haughton. You said that the data you showed us was collected at cannabis festivals.
Yes, cannabis-related events, yes.
Right. And then you went on to say 80% supported the legalization of cannabis.
Yeah, 80%
I think there's a bit of bias there. I support cannabis legalization, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm not challenging that issue.
Yeah, no, it's not 80% of Jamaicans, it's 80% of cannabis activists. So we also administer questionnaires at the Canex event. We administer questionnaires even at your event here last year. So
yes.
It includes people who are interested in cannabis-related activities.
Yeah, I think that you needed to add that qualification to the data.
Yeah, man, I did say. Yeah, man, I did say it. This from the respondents, and the respondents are from that. I did not say the entire population of Jamaica.
We cannot generalize on what you presented.
No, you can't generalize, but it's a cross-section across the country, so you can use it. Remember, these are samples, and what we try to do is to make the samples as representative as possible. And the sample will never be a census, because there's no way we'll have the resources to go across the length and breadth of Jamaica to collect that type of data. What we had to do was to gather the people at central locations in Westmoreland, in Montego Bay, in Kingston, as well as in Mandeville, and to collect this data from them. So I'm not trying to make a statement about the entire Jamaica population. I'm just making a statement about those people who attend cannabis-related events.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Delahaye, you said that you have conducted or are in the process of conducting a randomized clinical trial for pain management. Right. Could you give us some more information on that?
Right. Happy to share it where we have the ethical approval. It's not ethics.
Oh, it's not ethics.
Yeah.
Okay. That's all.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Sheldon Foster, and I'm a research scientist, biochemist. So I'm interested I do the research, but I also want to see research taken to the market. Now, one of the ways to get into the cannabis industry is through a license. Now, after paying the significant amount of money to get the license, then you have to deal with the banks who will close down your account if you are a part of the industry. So how does the regulatory bodies, CLA and the others, deal with this issue?
Great question.
Alright, so what you're referring to is the banking issue that
yes,
the industry currently faces. And it's really not just a Jamaican issue, or it's not caused by Jamaican regulation. It's caused by cannabis being deemed a Schedule I drugs in America, federally illegal drug. So because of our corresponding banking relationships locally with American banks, other banks don't really want to treat with clients who touch cannabis. Now, we've had discussions with the Bank of Jamaica, well, we've tried to have discussions with the Bank of Jamaica. Our Minister, Mike of Industry, Agriculture and Commerce, Minister Shaw, he's most interested in resolving the issue, but if I'm to be honest, it's not something that's going to change overnight. With the passing of the Farm Act, which now allows hemp to be essentially descheduled from the American federal system, we're hoping that that might somewhat America's, view or treatment of cannabis generally, but it's being optimistic. I hope that answers the question. Well, the states in America trade interstate. So currently, even in America, the states that authorize the cultivation of cannabis or even the sale of cannabis, they don't do it from state to state. It's still within the state, so it doesn't reach the federal level. Right. So we.
The question is that we have their own banks. California has their own banks that accept. But they're a republic.
We've tried the cooperative approach, but then that still results in corresponding banking issues. But to answer your question, it's something that we note, it's something that we're looking at, but quite frankly, it's not something that we can necessarily shift our control.
Who is the we?
We being the Cannabis Licensing Authority.
They have the authority to do.
Yes. Just on the banking thing before we move on, in regards to your question, in Canada, because it's federally legal, the banks do open accounts for medical cannabis companies. The thing is, in the Canadian system, it was mostly designed so it was totally cashless. It was all done through credit cards and online, so it was very easy for them to control the money and see where it was all coming and going. However, I'd say for any Jamaican companies, maybe Canada might be an option. So.
Yes. My question is to the CLA representative. My name is Orville Silvera.
Yes, Mr. Silvera.
It was stated from the outset that products, edibles, etc., would not have started when the license system started, or the cultivation and extraction of oils. Have the CLA any idea when other products which are now being researched will be allowed into the cannabis market in Jamaica, the legal cannabis market?
Well, by other products, I mean cannabis oil is a product.
May I indicate to you, sir?
Oh, well, if you're speaking, hold on, Mr. Silver. You're referring to edibles.
I said that.
Right.
Like edibles and other things like that.
Yeah, well, no, I wouldn't be able to tell you when those will be permitted.
So relative to nutraceuticals, has the CLA done any thinking on nutraceuticals that will contain both CBD and THC?
Well, it's our understanding that the Food and Drugs Act is currently being amended to include nutraceuticals. So we have requested sight of the possible amendments to that. And so that is where we are where nutraceuticals are concerned. But it's something that we are looking into.
So Dr. Haye then should be able to tell us whether or not the Pharmacy Act is being looked at to remove the THC as a Schedule 1 from the Pharmacy Act, and relatively seriously, the same thing is applicable to the Food and Drugs Act you just mentioned. Because THC is the problem here. There is nowhere in the annals of medicinal cannabis use where THC is being restricted. There are anecdotal, yes, but there are evidence nonetheless that indicate that what is considered to be shatter strength THC, the distillate of nearly 100% THC, removed one nurse who was crippled by arthritis that released her pain. So effectively, you spoke, Dr. Haye, of a safe 5% and above. And the question to you, other than the first one, how is the word induced being used in the sentence, cannabis-induced psychosis? Thank you.
I know Orville very well. Sorry to disappoint you, Orville. I don't have an answer for you.
Mr. Silver, it's something to note though. The promulgation of the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act would mean effectively that acts that are affected by that, forgive the redundancy, will have to also be amended. And that has not yet occurred, and it's something that we noted. So you're talking about your food and drugs. You're talking about your Pharmacy Act that refers to cannabis as a poison. So these are things that will now have to be looked at in light of one, or industry, and two in light of the Dangerous Drugs Amendment Act, which was only promulgated in 2015.
Okay, we'll take just two more questions because we have to be out of here shortly. Okay, so two more questions.
Yes. First, I'd like to thank the presenters, some many of whom I know. I think you did an excellent job at the forum. I also particularly want to thank the presenter from Itopia for pointing out just how rapidly Jamaica has moved as far as this is concerned, because the constant refrain is that we've taken forever. My question, two questions. As far as I'm aware, the CLA at one time was looking at a cashless system for the industry, along the lines of what has been mentioned, to address many of the issues, the correspondent banking issues. I'd like to ask where that is, or if it has been, if pursuit of that has been discontinued. And also to all of the presenters, mention was made of the farm bill that was signed by President Trump in December, would anybody care to comment on the potential implications of this bill for the direction currently being taken with the development of the Jamaican cannabis industry?
All right, I think I prefer to start with number two first, as opposed to number one. With the farm bill, all right. So we are currently drafting draft instructions for hemp. Right, we currently don't have regulations for hemp. And in light of the farm bill, and in fact, I'll go on better. The WHO has recommended that CBD, I think, be removed from Schedule 1, and that it be that effectively hemp would now be no more than 0.2%. Would have no more than 0.2% THC. I'm trying to get the chemistry right. So that would that would have an effect on how we define hemp currently, if it is accepted. If that recommendation is accepted, because we define hemp as having no more than 1% THC. With the farm bill being signed, it would mean effectively that the CLA would have more applicants who clearly want to grow hemp. I don't know if it would mean that hemp would be readily imported by America, because the politics behind the farm bill is really for them to not be importing from China. It's to kind of develop their local market. So I don't know if we should be too excited about the farm bill. And in terms of the cashless system, it is something that we're looking into, but it's not the only thing that we're looking into, and that's the legal answer.
And just a thing with hemp is in Canada we've had hemp industry since 1994, and they've never been able to extract cannabinoids from hemp because you don't grow hemp to extract cannabinoids. And even recently, when the whole thing is now changed and we've got a unified cannabis industry, which is hemp, recreational, medical, the hemp producer is not allowed to extract CBD from the hemp. They have to sell it to a licensed producer who has an extraction license to extract CBD. CBD was rescheduled in Canada to a Schedule 2 narcotic, so it's still a controlled substance, and it can only be purchased through a prescription or through a licensed recreational cannabis store. So I know actually in the States with the passing of the Farm Bill, everybody thought that CBD now is going to become free, but if you actually look at what's happening in the States, they're cracking down on CBD and saying it's a regulated substance. So this Farm Bill has actually clarified the waters in the States a little bit, and I think you're going to see it's a lot harder to sell and distribute CBD products in the States moving forward. And internationally, there's going to be a lot more focus put on this and understanding. And once people realize that it is still a controlled substance somewhat, it will actually be a lot clearer for people to deal with. And then in terms of the cashless payment system, that's a great idea to have a cashless payment system. However, don't do away with cash, because as a person in the cannabis industry, the last thing I'd want to be is tied into a single platform for facilitating my consumers' transactions, and then also being stuck with them for only managing their fees, and you're in a monopoly situation, and it would just terrify the heck out of me. So, sorry.
Okay, my question. One is quick. What was your sample size, Dr. Haughton? How many people?
Yeah, the sample size was about 250 farmers and about, say, 800 consumers.
At how many locations?
Yeah, 6 locations.
Oh, thank you. Good. That is very good to know, because that shows the data is very sound. My other question, CLA. Have you put some more thought into having a special license in research for transport? So right now your transport license is commercial. It's very high. It's for carrying large numbers of cannabis from one location to another, as opposed to research, which is a lot smaller. Thank you.
Could you just repeat your question? If we put
some more thought, because your license fees right now for transport.
Oh, the license fee is quite high.
Right, because it's one tier. You have other tiers for field, depending on whether you're going to have a large field or a small field. But your license fee for transport is only one tier, but and at a commercial level tier. But what about the research tier for transport between the different locations to allow for research?
Well, I mean, that's a lovely recommendation. I can't say that it's something that we looked into, but it's
it should
be
because I was asked to do it and I gave it as a draft. It should have been at your disposal to look at.
You pass it on.
Just write a letter to the relevant minister, just highlighting it and just saying you're recommending an exemption of the fee, and then they're putting a small fee. That's what you should do.
Pass it on. Pass it on.
Okay. Yes, I will humor you. I will do it. Thank you.
Because you have to understand it was a whole volume of stuff, and that might have just got lost in the thing. But then this would be the only thing in front of the minister to consider.
Another consideration may be the fields or persons you may want to work with should have a license, which would make it easier for them to transport it back and forth from the research.
A list of persons. Okay, one last question, please. One last question.
And Sylvia, remember that the regulations are interim, so the recommendation that you're making is something that can be considered because the regulations are interim.
Just tell me when and where I can come sit with you.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Hello, good evening. Dr. Haughton, I want to applaud you for even taking the step to start doing the research because our part of the region is very short on doing our own research. We always have to depend on foreign research for our region, so I appreciate it. Good start. A lot was mentioned about the need for certain skill sets, the need for research, and all that type of stuff in relation to Jamaica's cannabis industry. Now, I want to know if there is anything being done strategically at the national and as well as the university level to develop that capacity, the human capacity as well as the research capacity. I ask this because I work at the Latin American Caribbean Center at the Vice Chancellery. Dr. Haye, we've met before, we've had meetings. We're working with universities in Latin America, signing MOUs between URD and these other universities that have capacity or greater capacity or shared interests in certain research areas. Cannabis is one of them. So I'm just curious, what's happening at those different levels to increase our human capacity to advance the research?
Maybe I just can come in. At the national level, I'm not sure what is happening in terms of looking at the industry and see where we need trained and qualified persons. But at UA, we have just been looking at a couple of courses that we're going to offer, and one of them would be a minor in cannabis biochemistry. Right. And then we hope to put that on very soon. But that would cover mainly, the cannabinoids to look at the science really, of managing this product. Right. So we hope that through life sciences, I know Michael just left, but there are a couple of courses we're looking at piggybacking on, through that horticulture and introduce some of these areas that will include managing and growing, cultivating cannabis. So it's getting there, but not as fast as we hope.
And you did mention MOUs with various institutions that would have the capacity to do the kind of research that is needed to kind of, one, regulate the industry in a proper way, but also push it along. That's something that the CLA is doing currently. We've been in discussions with various entities and institutions to kind of do the work that we can do. So that's the short answer from us.
Okay, so one last question. The gentleman with the hat, please.
Good evening, everybody. Question to the CLA.
No.
Does it have a bank account And how have you circumvented the corresponding banking issue to have that account if you have that? Another question is to Mr. Itopia. When Linus classified the ganja plant, why did he classify it as cannabis indica? Thank you.
Well, yes, the CLA does have accounts. And I don't know if we have circumvented the banking issue.
Okay, on the classification, okay, so for indica sativa, I would agree that if you're going to use that to describe the appearance of a plant, that's probably relevant. So like the short, stocky, broadleaf indica plant, or the tall, lanky sativa plant. However, there isn't a corresponding effect. That's more what I was saying. There isn't a corresponding effect to indica that's always going to make it sleepy or heavy. And actually, when you do a genetic screen of ones that you would call indica or ones that you would call sativa, a lot of times you might actually find more genetic similarity between one that's an indica and a sativa than ones that are both indica. So you're right in terms of the appearance and that kind of classification, using it that way. I think that makes sense. But in terms of using it as a way for patients to guide their selection of what kind of high they're going to get, no scientific basis.
Okay, thank you everybody. Just as a few announcements before we go. There's a book at the front you can sign before you leave. And remember, you can go to the tent tomorrow to have a look at all the cannabis. I'm not sure if they're open still now. And I'm just reminding you that right now we're going to start. The Ambassador Bernal will be speaking on the China-Jamaica Capital Connection. So you can stay, you're invited to all stay and listen to the next talk. It is the Ambassador Suka lecture series. So I hope that you can all stay for that. I want you all to thank you again for coming, and I hope you enjoy our presentations. Thank you very much. I think you should give them all a good round of applause, sir. Yes. I'm good. So I need to set up for my next one.
Right. That's at 5 o'clock, right?